GAA Championship is in full swing and there's been plenty of fixture clashes and calls for improved player welfare. We're going to talk about that today because enough is enough. Things need to change. I'm joined here by obviously Niamh and Molly, the newcomer, debut on HerSport.
Hello. Happy to be here.
We're going to chat you through the different perspectives about this because obviously we have it from the HerSport perspective, the Gaelic football and then Camogie perspective as well. So plenty to get through. We just get so many messages about this, Niamh.
Yeah, so we have been running HerSport, for over 5 years at this stage, and the amount of messages that we get is just insane, like about this problem. And I suppose when we were talking about it in the last few weeks, like from my perspective, I'm just like, I'm tired of seeing the messages. Like I'm sick of seeing the messages. So I can only imagine what it's like to be a player in the game. And while we can do our best to continue like reporting as much as we possibly can and calling on clubs, on county boards, on the LGFA or on the Camogie Association to try and work together and try and do better by the players, it's frustrating from our perspective because that's what we're trying to do is to share the stories and to be the voice of the players. But I just haven't seeing enough happening on the ground for actual change for these players. And there's a couple of different reasons I suppose that we're going to talk about as to why some of this is happening, but I just don't understand after how many years, like we're heading into 50 years of the LGFA next year, why things haven't been solved at this stage, because all that's happening is players are being left disappointed, teams are having to pull out of games, and that type of thing, and honestly it's just going to push people away from the sport.
And as you mentioned, there's a lot of reasons for that. It can be different age groups, so minor and senior teams clashing. It can be camogie and football clashing. It's kind of frustrating because you kind of become immune to it after a while. It's just like, oh, that's just the way it is. But like,
that's
it shouldn't be.
Yeah. No, it's totally unacceptable. And I suppose, I just don't understand why there isn't a directive from the top, because from the stories that seem to come in to us is that things are different in every single county. And I do understand that you have like your bigger counties that have a bigger base of players. So I understand that they can operate slightly differently, but I don't understand why there isn't even like, if you're a county that has this amount of players or on the bigger end and this amount of people registered with ladies football and with the Camogie Association, this is how you should operate. And if you're one of the smaller counties, this is how you should operate. I think there should be support and guidance from them. And I think we've seen like earlier this year from a Camogie perspective, a county team was just pulled out. Like they were looking for support, they wanted to play in terms of they wanted to play club and they wanted to play county, but instead of being heard, it seems like the county board just decided, right, we're pulling out the competition altogether. And that team, to me, to be honest, looked like a very young team. So it means that the county isn't actually retaining people beyond 25. Not many of them looked older than 25 or so. So people are playing in their first couple of years of work or college and then they're moving on. But like we know from looking at other clubs and other counties that people can be involved in the sport until well into their 30s, heading towards 40s if they're facilitated. But I'd say that the players like haven't moved up the age groups up into playing as adults. They're just sick of it and they're like, it's not even worth it. So like, why would those players come back and play next year for that county?
Which again contributes to dropout rate, which is obviously a big problem again that we see all the time. One example is the Portlaoise LGFA one recently. So they had a senior fixture and a minor fixture within hours of each other or on the same day anyways, and they had to end up pulling the senior team because there was so many minors playing up that like the game had to be played. But like you were saying, that can differ from county to county.
Totally, yeah.
So if you're from Sligo or Laois or Louth or somewhere, that's completely different if you're in Dublin or Cork or even like Kerry or something where football is obviously thriving. Like in your experience, Molly, have you seen that in that context? Because obviously there are so many clashes, and what would your kind of perspective be?
Yeah, I suppose things I've seen like in previous years, it is that clash, the games not being organised in a way that allows dual players, really, I think is a big thing. Them playing both camogie and football, but fixtures being put either on the same day within 24 hours of each other, it's just not feasible for the players to do both, and that does lead to that dropout then. I know myself, part of the reason I stopped playing football was because it was just too much of a workload, because you're trying to support, like, especially when you're a minor, you're supporting senior and minor teams, so that's just too much for one player to handle, I think.
You were talking about it as well from a dual perspective. How much does that play in? Because obviously, like touching on what you were saying, Niamh, there is that, we need more dialogue and open communication. Like, why can't everybody just talk to each other and get this sorted out?
Well, I think one of the things, if you're looking from a dual player perspective, and this is the first person that comes to mind for me, but like Hannah Looney was playing Camogie and she was playing football, and she was in a semi-final and a final, if I'm not mistaken, in the two sports. And you know, obviously she's been supported to do so. You know, it's a tough gig, but has the capability of playing at that level. But there's lots of other athletes, even at club level, aren't being supported to do that. You know, it's great that she has obviously been supported thus far. I'm not saying it's been easy. I'm sure there's been clashes, but
there was an occasion even this year where she had to choose, and we had the likes of Bridge Stack, Rena Buckley, all these legends saying that, look, when I was playing 10, 15 years ago, this was the case. It shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't have been the case then, and it definitely shouldn't be the case now. So like, it still goes on, club, county, no matter what it is. And obviously, like, this might get slightly resolved, hopefully anyways, whenever it is that we do see one organisation, but we're a bit of ways off that yet.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, and maybe what people from the outside don't necessarily realise, and I know we try to continue to highlight it, but the GAA represents men's hurling and men's football. And then you have the LGFA, which is women's football, and then you have the Camogie Association, which is women's camogie or hurling, whatever you want to say. And at the moment, from the women's perspective, the two organisations are completely separate, you know, and in some clubs they work great together, and you have, you know, maybe committees that are actually they operate as one committee, but in other clubs you could have three committees. You'll have a GAA committee, you'll have a Camogie committee, and you'll have a football committee, and depending on who's getting what, like, people do start to get a bit snipey in terms of what they're getting, and that'll happen at club level and at intercounty level.
I think that's something really important to emphasise, that like, it isn't just happening in club fixtures, and that would be bad enough, but it is county level as well. And like, why the organisations can't just work together on a player welfare basis even, and I know that was something you wanted to talk about, Molly, like the way like this is inhibiting players getting proper rest time and then even playing matches even in the same day.
Yeah, I think it's a huge issue that decisions haven't been made by higher up, like you were saying, having that set of rules, because it's putting it back on the players and whether or not they play at club. Say county players, if they're released out for club, you know, if they play those club games, they're doing their 4 or 5 nights of training with county, then they're suddenly expected to play at club level as well. Their teammates are disappointed, or they're expected to play. If they can't play, there's disappointment from their club. But if they're doing all that training, they're playing all those matches, like I've seen it myself, girls are getting injured, and it's just, that's ended up being an even worse issue then, because you've got teams going out with 5, 6, 7 injuries because players are just, they're exhausted. And they're like, there's no win for them, because they either go out and play and get injured because there's too much overload, or they don't play and they disappoint somebody. There's someone to disappoint.
I think from that perspective as well, that's where it really comes into the county size, because like you have the experience from looking at a Dublin setup, and then Alanna has the experience of being part of a Sligo setup and knowing how like relied upon you are in a smaller county or in a smaller club. Like people travelling home, and you hear it all the time, people travelling home from cities to try and play for their clubs to keep the club going, because they're so integral. And then I think in relation to you know, what you're saying there in relation to like a Dublin setup, like there is that opportunity for them to work together to try and support the players that bit further. But in a county like Sligo, maybe tell us a little bit about that, how tough it is, because the club may suffer and the county may suffer. And then the other thing is, aside from the players making the choice, in some counties the coaches or the managers or, you know, the county board will get involved and say, okay, this is what happens here. And I know in a particular county there's one set of rules for, you know, camogie players in terms of playing club and county, and there's different set of rules for the footballers in terms of playing club and county. But that's not the same in every county. So everything is just so different and so contrasting that different situations arise all the time, which just makes it really, really challenging. So that's from my perspective. I don't understand why the Camogie Association and the LGFA haven't said, right, this is what we need to do to make sure that these problems don't continue to arise. But I suppose if you want to tell us a bit about the smaller county and smaller club perspective, like how challenging that is.
For sure, kind of like what you were saying. So if a few players didn't come home from Dublin, or, you know, whatever, were injured, like there are times where Like, so if the team is 15, we might have 15. So if you don't show up, they can't field, and your club gets a fine of €200 or something. Yeah. And that has happened before. Or you can negotiate with the other team if they want to drop to 13. But if that's a competitive fixture, they don't have to. So they can play 15.
And look,
they shouldn't have to.
In lots of cases in sport, like, people want to be accommodating.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, you know, winning a league or winning a championship and stuff, unfortunately people can be ruthless, and that sport, if you can't field it, it's actually not their problem.
Exactly, but the problem arises when our senior team would be made up of quite a lot of minors. And then, so say like the Portlaoise situation, totally. The minor match is on 6 o'clock, the senior match is on at 7. Like, we've had games, I know when I was playing underage, where we played a full game minor and then went and played half game senior, second half or something. Just because we don't have the numbers. So, like, it is different county to county, and especially as well, like you were saying, the county board situation. So some of them are quite accommodating or try to be when they can. Others, it's just, that's the fixture list and that's the way it is.
And some of them, and this goes into, you have to look at what happens within the county, and in some instances the Camogie County Board and your football county board, they might have been fighting over some of this stuff for the last 20 years. And
the best part is, it mightn't even necessarily be the Camogie Association and the LGFA Association. It might be Brendan and Paul.
Exactly, that's what I mean. So that's why I feel like the direction needs to come from the top. So the Camogie Association and the LGFA, in my opinion, need to say to all the county boards, this is the story and this is the hymn sheet we're going to sing from. But I think at the moment there's so much discrepancy between what's happening in each county. And, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of, you know, it can be fortunate in instances where it's going the right way. But if you have the same people on the Camogie County Board and the same people on the Football County Board for the last 10 or 15 years, and they're just grating off each other, they're just going to start doing things, honestly, to be a bit spiteful, and so that their sport succeeds, you know? And then you have to try and get, like, that's the two county boards working together, and then you have to try and support all the clubs that are there as well. And, you know, if what we're really talking about is not actually managing just the two sports, we're then talking about managing the age groups as well. We've mentioned minor, intermediate, senior, but then it actually feeds down into, when you look at the smaller clubs, some of the other instances where you might be able to do an under 14s team, but then you're borrowing under 14 players for under 16s and whatever it might be. Like, there's a lot of that happening as well.
And it's not even to mention pitches. Who goes where and how you schedule them all. And it's going to be quite interesting when we do eventually get this new organisation, because obviously we've had it for years that, you know, women maybe getting the worst pitch or on the training pitch or something, and then the men on the better pitch. Or even like situations like gear, where it's like there is just such a inequality between the two. But if it becomes one organisation at the top, like, I know some clubs have one club's model and maybe this is already the case, but if it is that consistency, how it's going to be managed across all of that, because that's a whole other kettle of fish as well.
I think the clubs that operate as one club, I think, are, you know, moving into the future, moving forward, and the athletes will see the benefit from it, and then also the coach as well. And that's the other thing, like, you have to go down to every single level. Like, you don't want to show up, and you hear of it where, you know, teams are supposed to be playing a match or playing a final or whatever it might be, and then there's like men's team is training there. Like, who's getting into the fight to be like, all right, can you get off because we're playing the game? And then all it is like, again, it's just more opportunity for grading. But I think the clubs that are really, like, and I've heard, you know, great stories from people over the last couple of years where people are operating in that model, and, you know, it is, you know, the top pitches are getting split 50-50 and people are being looked after properly. But we do get a lot of stories of, you know, clubs that aren't facilitating. Unfortunately, a lot of stories where people show up to train or to have, you know, be playing a match and something and it's double booked, or people just won't get off, or you're training by the, like, on the edge of the pitch because there's a game going on that nobody communicated. And look, obviously there's mistakes can be made, but it seems to be on the women's side that they're missing out most of the time. It's them that's on the back foot, you know, and whether that's, you know, in relation to training or games, like, whatever it might be.
This is where them not talking, like, the committees, the higher ups, like, they're not talking as one unit. That's the issue. Like, it's not, it's just, it is a case, like, it's not as simple as it sounds, but it's a simple solution in that you just need to talk. Once you get everyone into a room to chat about it, that's how you come up with solutions. Not one team in one room, one team in the other change room.
Oh, totally, yeah.
They're operating as if they're
three separate
they're
entities.
In a match, they're in
Yeah.
opposition.
Well, that's the thing. At the minute, they obviously are like the separate entities. Now, hopefully, that's going to change in the coming years. But one thing that you said that was interesting, like we saw this year, Mo Nerney was talking about how the Laois county finals aren't on in the county final ground, like the big ground in whichever county it might be. But that's such a fascinating one because by rights they deserve to be there. But the GA own all these big pitches, not the LGFA, not the Camogie. So it's accommodating that. And like, yes, obviously they are good enough to be there and deserve to be there. But again, it's about like actually opening that communication process and letting them in as well.
Like I have a problem with that, to be honest. And like I think that all that has happened and has been happening over years, I don't know why there isn't like a rent to buy scheme, essentially. Because all that the Camogie Association, the LGFA have been doing, and any of the organisations or clubs that are setups that come down from them, is they're paying rent, but they're not getting anything for it. And all that they're being told and all that's happening on the ground is we own this, we own this, we own this.
And that's the excuse. That's the excuse as well from the men's side of things, because it's like, well, at the end of the day, we're being nice here and we're letting you on the pitch.
Like that's what the story is that they'll say that, but sorry, like you're paying your membership, you're funding the grounds, you're contributing to being part of the club. And what I think is something that people need to remember, and I've had conversations with my grandparents about this who are 90 odd or whatever, and my granny was talking about how involved they were in their local community, in the GAA. And like she would have talked about how she played Camogie, like they played Camogie to exercise is how she'd describe it. Nobody kept score, nobody cared. They were just out there hitting around a ball, and that was the story because that's what girls did. It wasn't competitive, it was just, to keep moving. But she said that they would have, washed the jerseys, they would have done fundraisers. So she said they used to put on like shows. So it could have been like Oliver or whatever it is, like all these shows, and they all participated in them. They're doing bake sales, they're doing whatever, all of these different things that women are contributing to. And even if you take like the women's teams out of a GA club, look at all the women that are down helping in terms of bringing kids to games, making sure that you're there to, tick the boxes from a child welfare perspective, that there's enough parents there that are helping in terms of coaching, that are organising all these things, like so many different things that they're contributing, but it's not being seen. And even if it is like, and you can go back and, in some houses, the woman is the breadwinner and they can be contributing. They're actually the people, the person whose money is going to pay for their kids to be involved in the club. So it's so community based, but we're yet to see the women being treated the way that they should, and that's where we need to see a change. And hopefully the amalgamation will do it. But there's a lot of cultural change actually needs to happen with the players too. And I would say I'd be more concerned maybe about your junior age groups than I actually would about your senior. I would love to see your senior athletes come out and speak a bit more. But I have an 11-year-old cousin, and she was talking about 2 years ago, so she was about 9, and she was saying how a little boy that lives on their road was saying that girls shouldn't play sport and girls shouldn't play football and all this kind of stuff. So that stuff is feeding into the psyche and into the attitude of, young boys that are 9, 10, 11 that think that the girls don't belong there. And if they hear, one person go around saying, well, the men own the pitches, the boys own the pitches, they're going to go around and say that, and then you're pushing the girls back and pushing them out from making feel valued, making feel like they should be there. And it absolutely contributes. Like, we're talking about Gaelic games as a whole being the biggest sport in the country, and that's how we're going to have people from, they'd probably be okay up as far as 7 or 8, but any bit older, they do tune into things, and you'll have it right up to the top. So then you have it right up to people in 70s, 80s, 90s believing that women shouldn't be part of it and whatever. But then when you look back into actually what has built the GAA, it's absolutely everybody in this country, There you go. You can go on.
I was when you were speaking there, I was like, that's cute. I think that's so important, like the visibility of it, because like you're saying there, women are involved in GA clubs and also watch it. I'd say the figures are close to 50-50 as fans of GA, which opens another interesting conversation, because over the summer we obviously had the UnitedForEquality campaign, and talking about all these issues where probably like it filled up most of the requests that needed to be changed. One thing I thought that was really disappointing out of that, how come we didn't see many, there were some, male players speak out about this? Because it should be as much your issue as it is the women's GA players. Because why wouldn't you want that equality in that vein? Because if that's what it's like now, and again, going back to what it was like years ago, nothing's ever going to change if somebody doesn't take a stand.
But that's the thing, I think, with it is, it's easy for people to turn a blind eye on things when it's not directly impacting them. So there'd be plenty of players who maybe don't have a sister or don't have a daughter, so they're not seeing the negative impact that these kind of actions are having.
But think about it, some of them do. Some of them have kids.
Yeah.
Some of them are old enough to have kids and do have, and you have sets of siblings. Alanna's been doing all the research on the siblings, and there's people that are seeing the direct comparison, and still you don't see enough.
But even that, like, I hate to go back to that dads of daughters, or like, you know, football players coming out and they're like, oh, well, I have a daughter, so I'd love like women's football to do well. It's like, well, you should want it to do well regardless. Like, if you're for equality and equal gender rights, like, why shouldn't it be the same? I just think it's absolutely mind-blowing. Another thing that got me over that coverage of that was everybody was talking about this protest, and obviously I know, like, that was the point. Let's raise awareness about these issues. And then the coverage was sort of leaning into, oh, we're talking about this protest, but we should really be talking about the football. And it's like, lads, you weren't talking about football beforehand, nor afterwards.
Yeah.
It's just a thing of like, oh, isn't it awful we have to talk about this protest? It's awful for them.
Well, they just want to sweep it under the rug. They don't like the negative attention. They don't want to put a spotlight on things because they know what they're doing.
But
is
it
wrong.
keeps rearing its head, and that's the thing. And I suppose, so going back to like the male players speaking up, I can understand in a lot of instances where players are kind of on track and they're very like tunnel vision on their career, right? And I can see that in some particular sports, but I think there's a lot of room for witnessing what's going on in GAA, and I think you'll see a lot more fathers and brothers and whatever in GAA because of the volume of people that are participating. Like, if you go and look at the Irish rugby team, it's a much smaller squad because it's one team that's representing the country, but we're looking at all of these county teams, so there's a huge volume of athletes, but we're not seeing that many people step forward. And there's no way that they don't see what's going on, whether it's their sisters or their girlfriends or their friends or whatever it is, they do. And I just don't think that there's so much conversation about it and everybody knows that it's a problem, that you're not actually sticking your neck out that far. Where, like, in instances where there has been problems with Irish women's rugby, sticking your neck out in that instance, it is a little bit riskier. You are, under contract, it is your profession, and some of the issues there have been, I'm not going to say more significant, but they've gone through trials and tribulations where I feel like everybody is aware of this, and some of it seems like fixable, but people aren't kind of stepping forward and talking about it enough where they could, and there are a few people that do, to be fair to them.
It's honestly a great point though as well, because like you were talking about, in some situations it's difficult. Let's say the Irish rugby, it's like, well, obviously there's money and contractual obligations there, but with this situation it's not the same organisation. And funnily enough, in one way that kind of would, for the moment, given they're not the same organisation, the GA, the Camogie and the LGFA.
They're kind of like, it's nothing to do with us.
It's kind of like, I feel like they do feel like it's something to do with us. So if there is going to be one organisation, and it's coming up soon enough, Mary McAleese was on the Late Late recently saying that as quickly as February they're going to be looking at making serious moves towards it. And obviously there has been that dialogue with grassroots communities. I think that's important. They, like, led by Mary McAleese and that whole organisation towards the movement towards one organisation, they have been engaging with conversations with people on the ground and then at all levels of GA. So what do you think that will kind of bring about, Molly? Solve a few of these issues anyways.
Yeah, I think the sooner it happens the better. I think it's been going on long enough where they've been doing a lot of talking, but I haven't really seen a lot of action yet. And I think the sooner that happens, the sooner everyone's in the same room talking, the sooner you see things like clashes being resolved. You don't see that on the men's side. You don't really. Because they're all in the same room, they're all talking, they're all coordinating. Like, when I was younger, I'd at least 2 matches at the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, whatever your weekend's done. That was normal for me. Whereas my brother, he'd have maybe one match because they alternated hurling one week, football the other. I don't see why that can't happen for us. I don't understand that at all. And I remember the workload of it as well. Like, you're exhausted and you're there like a 12-year-old and you're wrecked on a Sunday evening having played 2, 3, sometimes 4 games depending on how many teams you're playing on. You know, like it's too much of a workload. So if you get them all in the same room, just get them talking. That's how you solve things. You just need to talk it through first. And they've done a lot of talking, so I'd like to see some action next, I think.
Love it. Something you said there that really made me think of, you know, the Do It For Her campaign. It's like, as that 12-year-old, it's like, why do I have to do this? And in your situation, it's like, my brother or whoever doesn't, my friends don't.
Yeah.
It's like, for too long, it's just been accepted as the norm. And it just needs to change. Enough is enough.
Yeah. You're going to see kids like dropping out because they are exhausted, do you know, or they're going to be disappointed for different reasons being involved in the sport. And it's just that, you know, we're already talking about trying to, you know, increase the participation of girls in sport, and, you know, it is a sport that requires 15 players in the team, and you quickly go up the age groups, and if people drop out, like what you're saying is you can't field a team, so then everybody loses. So they talk about how girls are more involved in like individual sports and that type of thing, and, you know, when you're in an individual sport, you rely on yourself. When you go to a team sport, you rely on others, and if you're trying to field a team of 15 players and, you know, they're exhausted, you know, it's tough, or they feel like they're undervalued or not treated properly, or whatever it might be. And look, that's not even getting into the fact that we're hearing, you know, athletes that are playing intercounty level and coaches that are coaching at intercounty level saying that you know, the skill development in the women's game is of lower standard because the coaches aren't you know, it tends to be maybe parents that don't have a background in GA that are starting out with your kind of nursery kids and that type of thing, and that the boys are already getting better, you know, standard of coaches, and I know Niamh McAvoy has set something up to try and change that, and then gets into refereeing. Like, I know that there's a serious frustration because, you know, refs are out there trying to do their job and the flipping rules are different. So the game is being reffed wrong because they think they know they're playing by the rules of the GAA, but then the LGFA and Camogie Association have different rules, and they have different rules from each other. They don't just have different rules.
I think the LGFA and Camogie ones would love to see it go to the GA rules. They're always calling for more physicality.
But it just is making everybody's job easier. And like, how frustrated are you as a player on a pitch arguing with a referee who's like, no, this is rules, and you're like,
I literally had that. Like, I was on the pitch and a ref was explaining to me one of the rules of the game. I was like, I have been playing the sport for a little bit, you know, like I do understand, but exactly to that, like they're changing it so much and it's so frantic sometimes. It's like, just let me keep up with the sport. Like, it's just play it.
It's just the same set of rules across the, like, if you want to look at football as one and hurling and camogie as the other, or if you can set the same set of rules across the four, it makes everybody's job easier.
Yeah, like I understand, like to some extent maybe they have to differ a little bit, but like I know the new rules came out and the whole thing with the sideline, like now you can take it out of your hand, like that's fine. I don't really understand why that's a thing. I think it takes away from the skill of doing the sideline puck. Like, I probably shouldn't be, you know, arguing it because I'm a back, so I'm happy to take the strike if I can. But I think in my head that's unnecessary. I think they're not focusing. They're making those changes. I
think that for me, and look, I'm from the outside looking in, like I played camogie for a couple of years, but it was when I was like 15, 16, so I was like not good, you know. I honestly couldn't even tell you the rules. You know, I can watch a game, but I wouldn't be like, oh, that's a free because of X, Y, and Z. I was on the pitch, but just kind of following the ball. I was there. But from my perspective, I actually don't have a problem with the sport adjusting the rules. So we're seeing that in rugby all the time where the rules are changing. But I just think that they should be the same across the genders. Because like if you're looking for people to volunteer their time to come down and to ref the games, and you're typically pulling from the same kind of pool of people, but you're coming up to issues within club games where people don't know the rules because the sets of rules are different. And my problem isn't really with the rules actually changing and progressing, because I think we will have to change. Like in a sport like rugby, they're saying it's getting so much more physical that they're learning so much more about concussion that they have to change it. And then the other thing that they try and change sometimes in some sports is to make it more entertaining. So sometimes they might feel like, okay, that's starting to get the game's gone this way and the entertainment has kind of slightly gone down, so if we tweak the rule, we keep the sport for a viewer perspective, a fan perspective, in entertaining. But I think if there's a set of rules change, like I don't know if the GAA changes the rules not often, but we have obviously seen recently the Camogie Association has. I just think they should be changing together, you know?
Yeah, I understand that, and I think it does make sense. You need to progress, but I think I think there's so many things that need to be changed. My confusion is why so much time is being put into the rules and not more so into, like we were talking about before, like why aren't we discussing those clashes with games more? Why isn't that being fixed? I'd much rather see that be fixed instead of being told I can take a puck out from my 45 like out of my hand. Do you know that kind of way? Like,
There's more pressing issues, you feel?
I think so. I think the amount of players I've seen getting injured because they've too much on their plate and because the decisions aren't being made, they're being put in really tough decisions that they have to make. They're not making great choices in terms of like there's no good one for them to take. Someone's going to be disappointed or they're going to injure themselves. I think that's where the focus needs to be at the moment. Now, obviously, you always have to progress the rules, that makes sense, but you need to also be putting the same amount of time into player welfare, into organising the game so that it's not impacting players to such an extent and to such a volume. So many players are getting injured at the moment.
And it's being overwhelmed. Like if you're in secondary school, like if you're in 5th and 6th year and you're trying to keep up with all these things, like something's got to give.
Even college. College is a huge shift, and it's, you're going from playing underage, maybe you did 1 year at minor, like minor and leaving cert, oh gosh, the stress. Then you go into college. Then it's the college team you might need to play for. It's your club team. It could be 2 age groups.
It could be the county as well.
It could be the county,
and then that's 4 teams you're playing with.
It's how many nights are you supposed to train? And again, it's those decisions aren't being set as like a guideline for people to follow. It's kind of just each club makes their own decision, each team makes their own decision, and then it's left to the player again in most cases to have to make those tough calls, and that's taking away from their energy into the game itself. Then they're spending so much time stressing about who do I play for, how many times do I train. That stress goes into those injuries then, and that's what causes it as well.
Well, I think that might be a good place to wrap up. People often say we see the best of the GA in the toughest of times, so maybe they'll get together and we'll see the best of it yet. And hopefully the one organisation comes sooner rather than later. But just to say, we do hear you, we do see you, we see all the comments and the tags. Hopefully we see that getting resolved. But yeah, good to chat about it today, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're really close to 7,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, do click that button, hit the like button as well, and leave us a comment, and we'll see you again.